we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. On infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections.
If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who want it until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious.
Violence and vandalism is being led by Antifa and other radical left-wing groups who are terrorizing the innocent, destroying jobs, hurting businesses, and burning down buildings. They are coming after me because I am fighting for you. That's what's happening.
Greetings, fellow thought criminals, and thank you for joining the insurrection. I'm Michael Lauber, and today I'm joined by Andrew Mahler, host of America Made, which you can find every Saturday right here on Ex American News at 5 p.m. Eastern. How you doing this morning, Andrew?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me on, Michael.
Well, thank you for being here. And let's just jump right into it, because I think the Democrats' push for a civil war, this escalates it to a new level. And, you know, like I've said before, like, we're not really in a hot civil war. Like, it hasn't really fully gone kinetic. There have been some hot moments, obviously, with the assassination of Charlie Kirk and other violence committed against ICE agents. You know, it's arguably it's gone hot. It's gone kinetic, but it's more like a lukewarm kind of kinetic. It's not full on civil war yet, but it's certainly what they're pushing for. But Minnesota prosecutors charge ICE agent with assault, issue nationwide warrant for arrest. Sorry, I was having trouble reading that on my screen. It went micro all of a sudden. But this goes back to an incident that happened in early February. So again, this is the same time where we had all these blue-haired moon bats chasing ICE around, running their little blockades, trying to run them down in the streets and getting shot for it, or arrested. And this is one of those type of incidents. They were getting followed and harassed by a number of these wine moms, and one of them jumped out of the vehicle, pointed a gun at them, forced them to stop, and they're now saying that constitutes assault, and they're charging him with 2 counts, and as the headline says, it issued a nationwide warrant for his arrest. Now, I kind of figured like all warrants are typically like, yeah, you know, nationwide. I mean, I know a lot of times it's just a bench warrant, but still, like, those go out in the system. So if somebody gets picked up wherever, they'll get drug in. Like, you know, I know people this has happened to before, where they've had like a parking ticket that blew off their car. They never knew they had it. And then they get a bench warrant issued for them 3 months later, get hauled in, you know, fingerprinted, photographed, immediately released, and then have to make an appearance in front of a judge. But you know, this is another escalation of this. You know, clearly this agent did not violate anybody's rights. They didn't commit any crimes. They're being followed and harassed and prevented from doing your job because they're trying to when they're trying to warn the illegal alien criminals and protect them, but targeting our ICE agents, something has to change. But again, this is just another escalation. Of course, the left is rallying behind it. The right's pointing out the hypocrisy and the lies here. But I see this as another major escalation, and I think we're going to probably see more of this.
Yeah, we certainly are. And it's unfortunate that our, national figures are going after ICE and they're not supporting them. And, you do have to get to a conclusion where you start to wonder, are these people working for the global elite, the insiders who want to erode our country, allow the mass deportation of the foreign world? I was talking on another show yesterday, my buddy Rob Carter's show, and I articulated this in this way, and I think it's true that, we live in right now, at least, this world that's constructed under the auspice of, being a unipolar world order where the United States is the key, geopolitical figure. Our will, our agenda really does dominate the situation globally in politics. But
Sure.
the elites want to move to what they've called a multipolar world order instead of a unipolar world order. And to do that, they really do have to import the foreign world into the United States and change our demographics. They have to bring in all these different cultures, all these different sorts of law, Sharia law, whatever it may be. There has to be erosion of that. And mass
Yeah.
migration really is, honestly, when you think about it, the key issue
Yeah.
because, things with our economic state, things with our agriculture, a lot of these things can be turned around somewhat quickly. But when you have a culture, a morality, a national identity, people who are in office because they won due to rigged elections, because of mass migration, a lot of these things are really hard to fix. It's really hard to turn it around. So we really should be treating this mass deportation issue as the top priority. Of course, that's what
Yes.
got Donald Trump elected. And anytime you see a story like this, it's just infuriating because it shows that there's not consensus on this on an issue that should have such wide consensus. And that's why in the midterms we're really going to have to send a message here as to what we want to prioritize. And a lot of people are talking about amnesty. I think that amnesty is an absolute travesty. I think that should not be on the table right now. We have so
No.
many issues, and the fact that we're discussing amnesty is so weak. And you have Republicans discussing amnesty,
Yeah.
Republicans in Florida discussing amnesty, and considering it. This is unacceptable.
Yeah, agreed. And we're going to get to more of that here in a minute with another, a lot of these same group of 19 that just voted for the Dignidad Act or whatever, or co-sponsoring it now. These 19 undocumented Democrats that need to go. But we're going to talk about that more here in a minute. We got another story that really underscores your point in Europe coming up too, and the divide there from illegal immigration. We've covered earlier this week, which has happened in Ireland over the weekend, where they're finally starting to stand up. But we're going to go back to Spain here in a little bit. But I'm going to bring in something else though, and I wish I had a slide for this, but I forgot to grab it this morning. Clarence Thomas, there's a video of him going around, a speech he made at some sort of a function earlier this week, where he talked about, like, Americans Week. We really need to take the reins and take control of our country and stop listening to these globalists, Gesundheit, that are tearing us down and that that so many Americans are operating outside of our interest, that we got to start doing what's best for us and taking the reins in our country again, and stop being afraid of the people that are saying, oh, what you're doing is not nice, it's mean, we should let all the immigrants in, well, or we should bow down to these European interests that are harming us, that we should. I mean, it's upside down and backwards, and that's part of the problem with the left's position, where they are against anything that Trump does. It really is lunacy. But we got to get back to actually fighting for our country, ignore these criticisms and the name calling from the left, because again, it doesn't add up. Their policy positions make zero sense under any level of scrutiny, if you're even going to be remotely honest about it. We got to start treating it for what it is, like I've been saying for a long time. Well, they don't have valid viewpoints. This is clearly, insanity or leftist fantasy, but we pretend somehow they have a valid viewpoint. Like, this isn't the 1980s, this isn't the 1970s anymore. It isn't. There's some Democrats that are commies, and there's other ones that just have a different way to get to the same point, and they love America. Those days are out the window, totally gone. Yeah. And even in the 70s and 80s, the left was largely wrong on things, but there were some people up there that did love America and just had crappy ideas on things, or a different way to accomplish the whole thing. But that isn't the reality we live in today, especially when we have stuff like this. With, again, like, make no mistake, this is purely a political move to charge this ICE agent. It's a way to whip up their base again, get them frenzied and out in the street, because they've lost momentum on this issue, because things have settled down up there. But to your point, we really do need to get serious about mass deportations. I wish the Trump administration would go this direction. I mean, I think we need to take E-Verify, mandate that, and put the onus on employers, so if they have any illegal aliens at all working there, they won't anymore, that they'll have to fire them or lose their You get insurance discounts and other things for being E-Verify compliant. Lose that because, again, we attach it to dollars. That's how you're going to get them to change. It's not going to happen because they want to, unless there's pressure because you're attacking the bottom line, or pressure because people might go to jail for them violating the law. It's not going to change. So we have to get to this, and we have to just end this temporary protected status for everyone. That's another story we're going to get to with Republicans again pushing for that. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't either. And, you talk about the Democrats at one point in time being, perhaps honorable and having difference of opinion. And that's true. You look at, John F. Kennedy, for example, somebody I have a lot of respect for.
Yeah.
But now we're at a point in time where the Republicans can't, even be trusted. I'm kind of laughing at myself even saying that, because who knows if they ever should have been trusted in the first place. But
Bingo.
You can't, they're just as bad, right? They're the uniparty in the truest sense. And I have to say, when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. ran this last go around, I was very attracted to his, independent campaign. And I do think that is where we should be, heading. That's what the founding fathers said, is the ideal. Of course, it's impossible to break away from the two-party system, but those are the thoughts that came to my mind as you were saying that. But yeah, when we get into this idea of amnesty and, opening the border, these are things that Republicans seem to just capitulate with the Democrats on. They both have, I heard somebody say this once, and I thought it was such an apt description, is that the Democrats and the Republicans, they're both vying for the CEO position of Gulag Incorporated, but they just have different policy plans for how to run the company. But the end result of the company is still people being put in the gulag. They just have different proposals to be CEO, and they're constantly pushing for it. So that's what you see. And this amnesty discussion, like the Dignidad Act or whatever, Maria Salazar, I think her name is, Congresswoman down from South Florida, she has been pushing for this hard. And unfortunately, you look at the background to some of these people who are in Congress who are pushing for it, and, they come from immigrant families. They have a background in that. And I get it, right? I'm sympathetic to that. But this is not the solution. Coming in and you're basically writing off, and they say dignity and they cloak it in all this equity and all this junk, but it's writing off the sins of the past and just giving these people a green light. And that's just not acceptable.
Yeah, well, bingo. Yeah, and it's business interest too in a lot of this, pushing for this. But to your point, right now we're basically we're fighting for who controls the gulag, and will you get 2 servings of gruel per day or 1, and will the sex changes be mandatory or not? That's essentially what we're arguing over. But yeah, exactly. Here we go. 10 Republicans defy Trump, vote to extend major protections for Haitian migrants. I don't understand. They're not. They're wreaking havoc here in Springfield, Ohio, where they eat the cats and dogs. It's just 20 miles from where I live. The town is destroyed. I mean, it's. I'm going to be heading back up there hopefully here soon. I'm working out something with an investigatory group. I've gone up there before with Ben Berquam, and we report on what's going up there. And it's only gotten worse since then. Ben and I went up there about a year ago, I think, or a little over a year ago now. And when we were there, we caught one Haitian guy taking driver's license exams. He took at least 3 of them for different people. We were up there. We saw one of these famous car crashes. Went by the apartments, which, by the way, the mayor owns, that 2,000 of the Haitian families live in. So he's lining his own pockets. We went into different employers where we met with staffing companies that were laundering people to big employers in the area, and they're paying them again 3/4 to 2/3 what they would pay an American to do the same job. It's upside down and backwards. This really is modern day slavery, but we have these retards on the right that are just going along with it because it benefits themselves financially. They're insulated from it. They don't have to deal with the effects of having 25 to 30 million illegal aliens here, the high housing costs, the high insurance costs, the destruction of the communities. They're insulated in their mansions, behind their brick walls with their security teams. They don't have to deal with the crime. They don't have to deal with anything else. They don't live in the south side of Chicago, which has gotten 10 times worse. Well, it's been flooded by Tren de la Agua and other criminal gangs from South America. They don't have to deal with the apartment takeovers or all the other stuff that's gone on. They are insulated. They don't care. And that's the problem. Every one of these people should be primaried and removed. We should go through that whole list of 19 15 that voted for this, and most of these 10 here, I'm pretty sure they all appear on both lists. But these guys should be persona non grata. We should be targeting every one of them. But unfortunately, a few of them, like the ones from Texas, which again, I can't believe a Republican from Texas that would vote for this kind of open border policy. But then again, Texas is not nearly as conservative as a lot of people pretend it is, especially the leadership and the party infrastructure there. They're basically already borderline Democrats. They're not real happy that Eye Patch McCain got removed. They're also furious that you've got the AK Jesus now running in a seat of another known rhino down there on the border. The other one that just resigned, Tony Gonzalez. I don't know what's with Congress and all these affairs, but anyway.
Well, isn't that guy on the top left the one who said Trump's the close to being the second coming? I'm pretty sure that's him.
I think that's Don Bacon.
Yeah, Don Bacon. I'm pretty sure he said recently, Trump is as close as we can get right now to the second coming. So that was an interesting comment. Pretty sure that was him. Could be wrong.
Yeah, well, he must have needed somebody's votes because, otherwise he's out of sync with reality.
Yeah, he's absolutely out of sync with reality. And this really is like the ultimate betrayal. When you talk about this, I mean, I just can't. And I know we talked about this on your show, Michael, in prior episodes, like Nick Shirley and what he did, that should have blown the lid off of all this stuff. Like when you talk about, Somali immigrants and Haitians and these people are coming in here legally, like imagine a timeline where Nick Shirley gets 60 million views exposing Somali daycare fraud. And then just literally a few months later, Republicans are voting to protect Haitians. Like the timeline should be, that gets exposed. Everyone's woken up. Man, this is crazy. Why did Nick Shirley do this and not the mainstream media? Good for him. Now let's actually get Republicans who are involved, who are going to, combat illegal immigration, fraud, all these different things. And yet the opposite is happening. They, all these disclosures come out, all this data is revealed, all these investigative reports are conducted, and it proves that this is an issue. And yet our leadership, the people in positions of power, they're like, yeah, that's interesting. They'll say on Fox, we need to stop it. We're going to work towards it. We need to enforce President Donald Trump's border wall to keep America secure. And then they go and they vote for these Haitian people to have protection. And it's infuriating. And if this isn't the proof you need to be able to illustrate that our elected representatives are not working for we the people, they're working for special interests, they're working for personal and financial gain. If this isn't the wake-up call for you to understand that, I don't know what else will wake you up, because this is how bad the situation is. This is a no-brainer. I would even say these sorts of votes are impeachable offenses. Like, these people are really putting our national security at risk. They're allowing the cultural degradation of the United States, and it cannot be accepted. All those people need to be primaried, and I agree with you 100% that they need to be persona non grata and just exposed to the utmost degree.
Yeah. Well, we need to throw them out of the party, throw them out of Congress, and strip all their power away. And to your point, Nick Shirley is really out there. He's been doing the job the mainstream media refuses to do. And what's he get in return for it? California is now passing this Stop Nick Shirley Act to target citizen journalists like that for exposing fraud. He could get $10,000 fine per incident. Not just him; it's any other citizen journalist that's out there exposing fraud, because they're saying, "Oh, well, it's racist or xenophobic or whatever," to expose all these illegal aliens defrauding America. And further to your point, the DOJ is not doing enough. I know Todd Blanche is out there tooting his own horn saying, "Oh, we have 8,000 open investigations into fraud." Yeah, well, they're still not going after the political appointees and politicians and program administrators and other officials that have been orchestrating or benefiting from a lot of these schemes, even though, again, we have direct lines where a lot of this money is making it back to the Democrats. James O'Keefe just got a guy in video in LA talking about how this fraud benefits Karen Bass's electoral campaign, keeps the coffers full, or however it was he put it. They know what's going on. They're allowing this. They're benefiting from it, I'm sure, behind the scenes. And I bet out of their whistleblowers, they have the 550 plus in Minnesota, and I don't know how many elsewhere. I'm sure we'll have some of them that say, are saying, yes, this was known. This is why it was allowed. We weren't being allowed to investigate it or stop it. We know that a lot of these Leering centers and other things were contributing to political campaigns of Tim Walz, sorry, I'm blanking on the name of their age, Keith Ellison. He's on video. Yeah, he's on video at a fundraiser with some of these major violators that stole millions and millions of dollars. And again, these are the same people he refused to prosecute when it was brought to their attention previously. Like, it's got to stop, and there have to be actual consequences. When you're violating the law, allowing others to violate the law, and in a position of power to do something about it, and you refuse, you got to go to jail. We got to send a message that this will not be tolerated, and we really do need to claw back all this money, but even more importantly, end these programs. Like, I don't know why we are spending federal money to open daycares anyway. Like, well, why is that something that exists to begin with? Or with a lot of these other funding of different programs, whether it's for autism or hospice or home health care agencies or whatever. I mean, I get that some of these are reimbursement ripoffs, where they're straight up lying and just lining their pockets using an existing program to do it. But a lot of these are special programs that are rife with fraud, like the meals program under COVID that Ilhan Omar co-sponsored, and then the Somali community used to line their pockets, including, a restaurant that was connected to her husband, which, I guess we shouldn't talk about that because he was found not guilty. He was just an investor. He didn't know anything about it, even though the rest of them went to jail. And I can't remember what the total was they ripped off, but it was ridiculous. They were basically claiming they were distributing 5,000 plus meals to hungry children every day and getting paid by the federal government to do it. This has to stop. And like Clarence Thomas said, we got to start taking this stuff seriously. There have to be consequences. We have to reclaim our country, or we will lose it.
Yeah, exactly. And we still have entities like Act Blue, right, that are around committing fraud. And we have political fraud. We have voter fraud. We have, daycare fraud, healthcare fraud, all these different things. And they're coming back to the American taxpayer. And, Michael, last night I just did a national webinar for the John Birch Society on making America states again. And in this presentation I gave, it was about an hour-long presentation. And in it, I talked about how the states can push back, how the states can, contribute in this effort to save America. And one of the key things I illustrated was this idea of nullification. And nullification goes back to the Kentucky Resolution, the Virginia Resolution, 1798, 1799. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Kentucky Resolution in response to John Adams' Alien and Sedition Act. And this was the idea that the states entered into a compact or contract with the federal government when we created the Constitution, right? So it's this idea of principal and agency law. You have the principal, which is, the states, and then you have the agent, which is the federal government. And they enter into a contract where the states ask the, agent to do a particular item. In the case of our system of government, it's Article 1, Section 8, provide for the common defense, make and declare war, right? Certain things with currency, establishing post offices and post roads. It lists out in our Constitution what the specific criteria is. But when that contract is violated, when we see, the federal government doing things that they shouldn't, or even at a state level, this applies, right? Where you read your state constitution, the jurisdictions of your governor, your state senate, your state house. When these people act out of the bounds of the documents, they are violating the, principal agent contract law. And therefore you can nullify those actions. And actually, legally, constitutionally, the breakers of the agreement can be held legally liable for the offense. And this is the sort of mentality we have to get back to in our country, is that when the federal government does something that's out of line, like, and I gave the example last night in the lecture. I said, if you hire a contractor to come and build you a deck and you say, I want a 10 by 10 deck, I want it made out of composite wood from pressure washed, or what do they call it?
Pressure treated
wood from Lowe's. I want it stained hickory brown. and I want it done in 3 weeks, right? And you come up with a budget. So you have an objective, you have an outline, you have a budget, and you have a timeline. Now, if that contractor builds you a deck, but he makes it a 20 by 20 deck, and he uses composite material and wrought iron spindles, and he replaces your shingles, and he cleans out your hot water heater, and he builds you a pool, and he gives you a bill for 50 grand or 75 grand, and he says, "Hey, would love for you to pay this. Thanks for the service." And you say, "Wait a minute, all I wanted was a 10 by 10 pressure treated wood deck, stained hickory brown, and yet I got all this stuff." You as a customer, as the principal, would not be obliged or responsible to pay for those things because it was a breach of the contract. The same is true with what's going on in our system of government right now, where we, the people, through the 16th Amendment, have funded the federal government directly, breaking the idea of federalism. Now the feds have a direct line of power to the people financially through the 16th Amendment. This is all a break of the contract. And we, the people, have a right to nullify these sorts of things. We have a right to nullify these sorts of actions at the state level and also at the federal level. And unless and until we do that, I don't know if we will see change, Michael, because I do think that there is an opportunity to vote the rascals out and get new people in Congress. I think that's true. But I really am convinced that it's going to take a handful of states that are going to have to stand up and say, hey, not here. We're going to nullify. And COVID's really the perfect example. COVID's the one thing we had where we could actually see this unfold in our eyes. Like, what did our federal representatives actually do during COVID for us? Like, honestly, everyone wants to be a hero who was an elected official and say they did something, but who in Congress, who in the Senate actually did something? Like Rand Paul did some great questioning of Anthony Fauci, and he tried. You had people like Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin who tried to do some things, but where was the resolve? Where was the conviction? We didn't see that. But what did we see at the state level? At the state level, we saw Ron DeSantis. We saw, certain people at the local level stand up and say, not here, not going to happen. That bred courage where you had other states like Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas start to kind of do things that were in line with what Florida was doing. The same is true, I think, with all this immigration nonsense. If we can have some states step up and say, you know what, we're going to get involved in this. We're going to, make our state safe. I think that will have a cascading effect and hopefully actually yield some faster results.
Yeah, exactly. The states do need to start reclaiming their sovereignty. That was kind of the whole idea, again, with the Constitution, was to have these individual laboratories operating on their own with the federal government just there to handle the things that you needed a stronger force for, or things that need to be standardized between the states, or having an outlet to solve any disputes between the states. Said it again over and over on here ad nauseum, that if we just got back to living under the restraints built into our Constitution, probably 98% of our problems would be solved. That we'd still have a few things to deal with, but largely our problems would go away if the federal government just put back on the shackles that were put there for a reason. The founding fathers knew what they were doing, and we strayed so far away from it that the federal government's just become a bloated mess now. And like as you said, they reach into all of our pockets every single week. Every time we get paid, they steal our income. And now you know what? Maybe it's time to remove the 16th Amendment and remove that source of revenue for the federal government permanently, and help restrain them financially, except I guess the Fed would just print unlimited money, so we just rack up more debt that way. But that's another thing that needs to go. We shouldn't have any Federal Reserve. But that'll get us into a whole nother topic. All right, well, I got another one for you here. Rep. Annalena Paluna tells CBS News the other shoe is about to drop on Swalwell pal, Senator Ruben Gallego. There was also this video Lauren Boebert put out yesterday, a quick walk-up interview she did, where she said, why is Congress so horny, or something along those lines. I can't find the exact quote, but I'm hearing something right now too that's sort of interesting, and I hope it's true. I've had multiple sources tell me this, that Swalwell and Ruben Gallego aren't the only perverts that are about to be exposed, that there's several others that Congress has known about. Again, we've talked about this congressional slush fund to cover up their misdeeds before, but that there's a growing movement, especially among some of the Republican women, since they have more balls than half the men up there, that they are going to be exposing a number of them next week. And you know what? Hey, maybe this is a good way. It seems to work to get people to step down like this. We can't remove these people otherwise. Maybe this is the path to do it, because I feel like removing any of these communists that are up there at the federal level, including the Rhino Republicans on the right, any of the is a step in the right direction. So I hope she's right, and I hope next week we do see it revealed about the indiscretions of dozens of more political officials.
Absolutely. And of course, we had the sexual misconduct disclosure bill that was supposed to, or resolution or whatever it was, the
Which they
movement,
killed.
which they killed. And, my Republican congressman, Jimmy Patronis, voted to kill it. No answer for why that happened. It's despicable. If there's nothing to hide, why hide it? Right. That's the big question. But yeah, Anna Paulina Luna and Lauren Boebert have been, in my opinion, sentinels in the regards of the Epstein files, in regards of, sexual misconduct and having accountability for that. So I'm very appreciative for them. Swalwell, he's the type of character that I really do think is just the tip of the iceberg. He's probably the most egregious example of some of the sexual stuff that goes on in Congress.
The most egregious so far.
So far, yeah. I'm sure there's worse. I mean, just like with regards to the flippancy of it, and the carelessness. Because like somebody, and I don't want to defame anybody per se, but there are certain people in Congress, whose name rhymes with Thin Z, Flam, and other people who I'm sure have partaken in some very odd things, that have just not come to light. And I do think we need to start getting to the bottom of that because, as Robert Welch said, the founder of the John Birch Society, towards the end of the struggle, he said with the global insiders, there'd come a point where they'd be running through the streets naked. He said that in kind of a hypothetical, illustrative way. But the point was that they're going to become so, flippant, so flagrant, so verbose in their degeneracy that they'll run through the streets naked. And we're starting to see that where, imagine if in the 1960s, something like Swalwell dropped. Right. Your heads would be rolling. People would be freaking out. Everyone would be under a microscope. And now they're just kind of like, I guess he should resign for governor. Yeah, killed his political career. It was just very nonchalant. I think we've become truly desensitized to that. So I say full transparency is always the answer. We need to do that. And I'm appreciative for Luna taking steps to do that.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think the only reason they went after Swalwell is because of the California governor's race. That as of right now, you have two Republicans at the top of the ticket. Now, I guess Tom Steyer's moving up and maybe in the second position, depending on which poll you believe. But a lot of Swalwell's base apparently went there, even though a lot of people thought it was going to go to Katie Porter. But now he is tied for second place or slightly behind Sheriff Chad Bianca. But, I think that's the only reason, because I know that behind the scenes, they've been encouraging him to drop out for a while because he was only polling at around, I think it was 8%, it might have been 10%. Sorry, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now. But that Porter was a little behind him, but neither one of them were at the 14 to 18% where Bianco and Steve Hilton are over there. So you're going to, because of the jungle primary system, you're going to end up with two Republicans on the ticket unless the Democrats coalesced around somebody. And all they have to do is get a Democrat on the ballot, and that'll ensure that they keep the governor there, because everybody knows that once the primary is over with, that they will the Democrats will coalesce around whoever. I just don't feel like there's enough Republicans or the will to actually win in that state. That yes, you'll see the support for them increase, but again, right now that there's essentially two Republicans. I think there's some other third dingbat that's down in the field of 80 people running for governor of California. Yeah. But they're going to end up with 32. Maybe a little higher percentage of the vote, because that's what they have combined now. Maybe they'll end up at, say, 40%, but the Democrats are going to hold it. They know it. They just have to get somebody on the ballot in the primary, and that's why they push Swalwell out. But, to your point, everybody knows this kind of stuff's been going on in Congress. They have this slush fund that they pay off their victims with. That should all be public. It's our money that they are using to pay off the people they harmed. And I get that there's probably a few of these that are just money grabbers, trying to make a buck, making false accusations. But I have a feeling that's not the majority of them. And to your point with Lady Graham, there's probably some Thai lady boys that would like to talk about that, or other victims that should be encouraged to come forward. And he's not the only one. There's been stories circulating around about numerous members of Congress on both sides of the aisle for decades now. And there have to be repercussions for this. Release all the information. They really need to release the Epstein files, start actually prosecuting people. If we don't have prosecutions before the midterms, we are cooked. And that is the bottom line. We have to have people paying for the crimes that they committed. We can't continue to look the other way. And, it's great that they're going to arrest some Somali fraudsters for their leering centers, and maybe arrest a few people in LA for hospice scams and other stuff. But we have to get to the problem. We have to actually go after the political appointees, the elected officials, and others that have been, they're gangsters. This is organized crime protected by Congress. It has to end. And if it doesn't, we are going to get smoked in these midterms.
Yeah, absolutely. And just yesterday, I was setting up and a part of an interview that Alex Newman, my boss, did with Thomas Massey. And I listened to the whole thing and was able to talk with his staff and be a part of the process behind the scenes. And it was fascinating to hear what Thomas Massey's been doing with regards to the Epstein files. He just gave Todd Blanche, the interim AG, an ultimatum that he has 30 days to release the rest of these files, or otherwise he's going to be held, or he's going to try to hold him legally liable for breaking the Epstein Transparency Act, or whatever the title of the legislation was,
which Trump signed into law, by the way. A lot of people forget.
Which Trump signed into law. That's exactly right. And the guy who's actually working to do what Donald Trump said is the one being targeted by Donald Trump and primaried with Ed Gallerin in Kentucky. So it's absolutely crazy. Thomas Massey said in the interview, it'll be dropping Monday. It's a fantastic interview at thenewamerican.com. He said in the interview that he is willing to lose his seat over this. He said, I don't care if I lose my seat over the Epstein thing. He's like, it would be well worth it. And I think he's a hero in that regard. You may not agree with everything Thomas Massey said. Personally, I haven't heard much I disagree with, but he is the type of guy who is willing to put his reputation, his political office on the line. And people say, well, he's benefiting from this. It's like, well, is he really? Because, the easier path would be to just kiss Trump's butt and get the endorsements and stay in perpetual power. He actually is being threatened with losing his office right now. I don't know what political gain there is out of that, when he could just very easily be skirting under the radar and keeping, the grifts going. So I think he's a patriot, and I agree with you. No accountability. The midterms are going to be horrible. You're going to have some wins in some areas that are going to be predictable, but you look at the Wisconsin Supreme Court election that happened. You look at the state representative races that happened in Florida and Miami and West Palm Beach. You look at
even Texas.
Special. Texas. You look at the special election results. The numbers aren't looking good. The voter turnout for Republicans is abysmal. Democrats are energetic, despite it being backed by all the George Soros, NGOs. The No Kings movement has a lot of juice. There are some things that are concerning for Republicans in the midterms, and honestly, there's no case to be made for Republicans. What have they done to tackle the debt? What have they done to secure the border? What have they done to make, houses more affordable? Costs are going up. They're higher. We're told eggs are cheaper. Well, great. Well, what about gas? What about homes? What about all these other things? And I get you can't fix it overnight, but there's been no steps to even make it happen. And yet we have, Iran war and talks of Cuba war and Cuba regime change. It's not going to look good in the midterms.
No, well, and you're exactly right. Once again, we're getting things we didn't vote for. It's not that they're all bad. Some of these international things that Trump's accomplishing are good, especially I think we did a lot with the tariffs to bring trade under control, get things back in our camp. And honestly, I do think taking Iran out is in our interest, but we don't need regime change around the world. I think grabbing, if you can grab a Venezuelan dictator drug dealer in 2 hours without losing any Americans, I think that's an accomplishment. I think if we could push the Castro regime or the remnants parts of it off a cliff without it going kinetic in Cuba. If we could do it just with pressure, I think that's fine. But Americans care about what's happening here at home. They really care about justice. We're sick and tired of this stuff. And again, codifying things like Congress has done nothing to earn people's votes. What do? They passed the Laken Riley Act and the big, beautiful bill. Otherwise, they've sat there with their thumbs up their asses and not done anything. They haven't codified any of these executive orders. They blocked the Trump administration on many of these aspects, and they're just an utter failure. So I don't know why people are surprised that Republicans are not showing up at the polls and are not enthusiastic about electing people. These losers haven't done anything to deserve their votes, or very few of them have. And, even if you're happy with what the Trump administration does, which I think largely the base is still, there may be some disagreements on some issues, especially, the lack of arrests and some other things that we've already covered. But, the Congress itself has done nothing to earn your support. Nothing. And, to your point with Massey too, I've seen he's still way ahead in the polls. It seems. I know he's raising a lot of money. Again, there's a reason people like him, and unfortunately, Trump's wrong on this. Massey stood up for the right reasons. Releasing these Epstein files is something that Trump talked about it even in the lead up to the election when he was interviewing with Aiden Ross and others that asked him about it. Again, people expect results, not sitting on your hands and essentially covering this up. Because make no mistake, that's what's happening at this point, even though a lot of people get offended when you say that, oh, they're not covering up. Well, if they're not going to prosecute people, I don't know what else you call it. That's what it seems like to me. And again, it can be doing great on other things, but this is an utter failure, and something has to happen to correct this. It better happen before November, or we are going to get smoked, and then it's going to be endless impeachments and whining and bitching from a lot of the mega base, because they're going to say, oh, it was all the fault of all these people that didn't show up. Well, why should they show up? You got to give them a reason to. You got to do what you say. And again, that's the biggest selling point on Trump, is he goes out and accomplishes the things he ran on, except for a few issues now where apparently we've gone 180 degrees out of phase. But I guess we'll get to more of those here shortly.
Yeah, and you also had in the news this morning, Republicans extending FISA, which is the spy authority.
That's kind of what I was alluding to. Yeah,
federal government to be able to spy on our citizens. So you keep seeing all these L's. They're catching L's like nobody's business. Like they're an MLB outfielder. It's just insane. And I agree with you. Unless until we get results, they're going to get cooked, and honestly, rightfully so. You tie the lack of results with then Nick Fuentes' Groyper movement, which is saying, hey, vote for the Democrats in the midterms. And I've talked to a lot of young people who plan on doing that. I've tried to dissuade some of them, but they are dead set. A lot of them are on voting for Democrats as a repudiation of what has been done. And, I think it's going to be a rude awakening.
Yeah. I think so too. I think you're going to see some support here and there for the few people that are doing what the people want, or at least pushing for it. But otherwise, I think a lot of people are just going to either not show up at the polls or not vote for Republican candidates. And it's a shame. We had every opportunity in the last 12 months to push the bulk of our agenda through, finally get what we've all been fighting for decades. But instead, like I said earlier, most of these Republicans in the House and in the Senate, they're out like blocking us, especially with the SAVE Act. Like, I think most of those people should be, we need to put gallows around the reflecting pool and just hang most of them. But they've been, outright blocking the will of the people, refusing to act, capitulating to the Democrats, and yet we're supposed to be excited and go out and vote for them in November. No. These losers all need to go. I wish we had a more organized effort to primary some of these people, but then you also have the congressional campaign funds and the Senate campaign funds that go out to protect the rhinos, spend this money there instead of getting real conservatives, people who actually fight for our agenda. They just want business as usual in D.C. And I bet a lot of them are secretly hoping the Democrats win in November so they can go back to that, go back to just playing their part, pretending to be a foil for the left. But let's jump over to Europe here real quick, because we're almost out of time, because chaos in Spain. Thousands of migrants swarm consulate after socialist government declares mass amnesty. So this gets back to what we were talking about earlier. So in Spain, this started with the socialist government started to fall behind in the polls. So and this goes back a month and a half, maybe a little longer now, so I don't quite remember when we first started covering this. Might be about 2 months ago. So at first they were going to legalize 500,000 illegal aliens in Spain, because that would give them the votes they need, assumingly, to maintain power. Then it went up to 750,000. Now I'm hearing that when this is all said and done, it may be as much as 1.2 million that they just say, hey, guess what, guys, you're magically citizens. Make sure you go out and vote for the socialists in the next election. And this is, again, a way to deflect and thwart the will of the people. But this has greater consequences even beyond Spain. Now, all of a sudden, if they are citizens in the EU, citizens of a EU country, now they can freely flow between borders. They can go wherever they else want in the European Union. And again, this is going to just cause more problems there. I don't know why Europe is so suicidal, but they are. I guess it's all that white guilt.
Yeah, and Europe's always, a couple of years ahead of the United States, right? So you can always kind of look.
Yep.
Excuse me. It's like a time machine. You can, if you want to see what the future is for America, you just go look over there. And that's what I think we're seeing. And unfortunately, you have a system where they're just embracing their form, and they're not allowing any sort of border enforcement. And it's sad. I know you've been, Michael, we've been together to Europe.
Yeah.
And you look around and it's just sad. And I went to London Heathrow Airport, and I'm walking around. And if you told me I was in, let me see what I could pick.
Waziristan.
Somalia. Or if I was in Waziristan, I would probably believe you if it wasn't for the Paddington Bear gift shop. Like I would have believed you. It's insane. So it's not racism. It's not, anything like that that's motivating these sort of sentiments. It's that God created nations. God created borders. God created individual sovereignty, just as we have our own homes and walls and doors that we lock and fences that we close. In the same way, we have borders around countries. And we want people to be able to thrive in their own nations. We want everyone to be a nationalist. And we want to protect our own. And we build walls not because we hate the people on the outside, but because we love the people on the inside, as President Trump said brilliantly, I think, a few years ago. So that is the push. And amnesty is the complete, to take an illustration, it's like somebody breaks into your home and they're rummaging through your fridge. Instead of calling the police and having them arrested and prosecuted, you say, you know what? You can stay in the guest room. We're going to let you chill here and crash. And that is a silly move to make. So, the Europeans, I'm glad they're protesting amnesty. I got to be honest, I'm a little surprised to see that. But that's a good sign.
Yeah. Well, I think at some point the rapes, the murders, the erasure of your culture, it's not worth the curry and the falafel. And people finally had it with this. London is lost. It's unrecognizable from where it was even just 10 years ago. Again, it might as well be downtown Baghdad at this point. And why is it that it's okay to erase our cultures? None of these countries would accept people from Europe flying in. If you wanted to open a church in Saudi Arabia or Syria, your head's going to be up on a pike. You're going to be thrown off on a building by the end of the day. And again, this gets back to what Clarence Thomas says. We got to start living in reality. We can't keep pretending that these are just neighbors or just a little different than us and they might not speak the same language. That's not what's going on. This is an erasure of culture that's spreading violence and destruction throughout Europe, and it is going to lead to a war there at some point. There is going to be it's going to go kinetic. It's already gotten close in Ireland over the weekend, and it's going to happen. There's going to be a flashpoint sometime soon where you will have two sides fighting in the streets, and we are not that far off from it. And even over in Germany, I mean, the rise of the right really proves this, despite the EU's best efforts to steal every election or interfere in every election they can, or jail opposition. But AfD tops polls at 27%, while 79% of Germans say current government isn't working. Again, I think it's obvious. We've talked about these problems in Europe, from the rising crime and rape to the same problem we have here with welfare fraud. I mean, their 10 largest cities in Germany are bankrupt or going bankrupt right now. just 10 years ago, Germany was one of the most financially stable countries in Europe, if not the most financially stable country. I remember like 15, 20 years ago, whenever it was, when Germany was bailing out Greece because they had money, their economy worked, and Greece was falling apart, partially due to boat migrants. But it's been this long and they just haven't learned their lesson. Instead, they've gone the other way and embraced it despite the death and destruction that it's brought to Europe.
Yeah, exactly. And you have the whole situation in Hungary, which I still need to look into. But Viktor Orban losing his seat, and
Yeah.
a lot of people told me that was negative, but then some people told me it was positive. I need to look into it and see what the truth is behind that. But yeah, Europe has to wake up, and AFD and parties like it, they're the future. Don't believe the negative press. It's really tough. I've even talked to a lot of conservatives in the States, and they've had negative opinions about AFD and things because they've been propagandized. But the truth is, people who are nationalists, people who want to put their country first, that's the ticket. That's the future. I think a benefit of Donald Trump running for office was showing that, hey, and winning was showing that, hey, you know what? Unconventional politics is probably our best bet. We need to get
Yeah.
people who are unconventional, who are not controllable. I still think Trump is a little uncontrollable. Despite some of his flaws and influences, but I still think he's his own man. And if you agree or disagree with him, he thinks what he thinks and he says what he
Yeah.
says and he does what he wants to do. And that is, in a sense, the spirit of nationalism. And I think that's what we need to see in Europe. So I'm pleased that these parties are still sticking around, and I hope they continue to surge.
Yeah, well, I think they will. I think we'll continue to see these movements growing in Germany and the UK and other places, but we're also going to continue to see shenanigans from the globalists, that they will use their power to crush political opposition. They will continue to jail people, target people, go after them for free speech and hate crimes. We're going to see that enforcement ramp up because it's all they have. Or they're going to use legal maneuvering like they did in Romania to steal elections. And then when they get caught afterwards, they're just going to be like, oh, well, it's too late to do anything about it now. Now this, whatever his name is, Dan, he's now seated as the president. So I guess we can't do anything. That's... even though they're caught in the act, that's part of that's why there have to be repercussions when people break the law. Wake up, DOJ. But it's not going to stop. I know they're losing power in the EU Parliament, but not enough. They have to actually be stopped. This needs to be corrected. If it isn't, Europe is lost. And unfortunately, I think they're already so far over that edge that even if they did try to correct now, like if Reform and Restore win in the UK and they actually do start doing mass deportations, you will see London will turn into a war zone overnight. No doubt about it. There will be violence in the street. It'll be burning. And then Paris will probably be burning in sympathy. And probably several cities in Germany, same thing. We'll see ramped up attacks just to get these cowardly elected leaders to bend to their will, to stop doing any kind of immigration enforcement or anything else, because that's what they do. They are terrorists, and they know that people will capitulate to their terrorism. All right, I want to sneak in a couple last stories here before we wrap up. Papal pacifism on Islam puts the West in peril. I don't know what the hell is wrong with the Catholic Church anymore. Like, I was born and raised Catholic, but they've gone full on commie libtard over the last several years. And now we've got the Pope straight up making up verses, trying to present it as if it was in the Bible at the Sermon on the Mount the other day to try to score. He forgot to throw Donald Trump's name in there, but otherwise he was clearly targeted at him. Just making things up. There is no backing. And this has to end. Same with embracing Islam. I saw a great post that somebody ought to show him what Iran does to their women before he goes out and defends their regime there. But again, this is another example of people refusing to live in reality. At the Vatican or a lot of other Protestant churches here, if they actually had any fortitude, they would have been calling for crusades decades ago and eliminating this threat, going back on the offensive, instead of reaching across the aisle and embracing imams and going to their services and everything else. This is a threat on humanity, and they refuse to acknowledge it for what it is. And unfortunately, you've got a lot of people in the Jewish faith too. Same thing. I don't know what the hell is wrong with these mental patients that vote for people like Mandami who root for their own destruction. But something's got to stop. And I do have there is another story to follow this that is a little bit better. But I don't know what the hell is wrong with the Pope or a lot of these Protestant leaders here in the U.S. Why they've embraced leftism, why they embrace this invasion of our borders and everything else. And I don't know what we do to get it under control, but we need to fast, because the churches have been perverted and corrupted, and we have to put our foot down and bring them back to a real biblical worldview.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did not agree with anything the Pope said on, the Islamification element or anything. I did appreciate some of his comments about, being anti-war. And you can always talk about, the issues with regards to, the Pope and his politics and, if he's right or not. But I did think it was nice to see a prominent religious figure talking about peace and not war when you've had, a lot of religious folks, at least in the United States, kind of not to get super theological, but some of the more, evangelical dispensationalist types talk about, it's our duty to go and crush the Islamics and, the Middle East and to take back, Israel. And you just had a lot of that energy coming out of the religious crowd in the United States. So I was appreciative. It was kind of a nice sigh of relief when I heard the Pope say, like, hey, let's stop war. So, yeah. Though I might not agree with his politics. He's obviously a progressive. He's obviously a liberal. He's obviously very sympathetic to Marxism. But I did appreciate, some of those comments. But when he went to, the mosque, and this is the guy who's blessing ice cubes for climate change. And I mean, this is not a friend of freedom or liberty. And I saw a lot of, Fuentes type people. And even Fuentes himself was coming out and saying, the Pope is, dunking on Donald Trump. This is the power of Rome, and the church getting involved in politics. It's like, okay, not the best take. But yeah, when it comes to Islam and what happened, I think Trump is right. When he was doing his press conference the other day on the lawn in DC at the White House, and they're talking about, the killing of journalists and the killing of women. He said, why don't you tell that to the Pope? Because it seemed like he was far too sympathetic to the Islamists.
Yeah. I mean, and again, that's half the thing. And again, it's okay to have a anti-war stance. It should always be the last resort, but we also got to live in reality with the enemy that we're facing, instead of embracing and coddling them and giving them basically credence on a lot of the claims that they're making, which are, again, false, especially going with what's going on at the ground there. And I wish we could go back to somebody like Pope John Paul, that was a warrior for freedom, that was fighting against communism. That did a lot to free the people of Poland. That really was an inspirational and pivotal figure in bringing down the Soviet Union. Somebody advancing the cause, advancing the true message of Christ, and moving the mission for freedom and prosperity globally. But instead, we have these socialist losers that have essentially taken over. Unfortunately, the last Pope, Francis, essentially rebuilt the College of Cardinals. So good luck ever getting anybody that's pro-Western values, pro-freedom, and anti-communist ever again there. At least not for probably 100 years. But let's see if they last that long. All right, let's end on a high note. I'll just cover this quickly. 42% of young men say religion is very important to them, a 25-year high. And this is after Easter weekend showed, I think it was a 38% increase of young people attending Mass in the Catholic churches, and a 27 or 28% increase, especially with young people in a lot of Protestant churches. That the younger people are becoming more religious, but specifically a lot of men are, and they're the ones that are out there having families and everything else. These are the ones that aren't completely indoctrinated in leftism. But it's good to see people getting back to their roots, especially the young, because this is what we need going forward. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the older generations are already lost, and they're so set in their ways, they're not going to change. Even if you present them with evidence, they just don't want to hear it. They stick their fingers in their ears and pretend somehow transing the kids is the right thing to do.
Right. Yeah, and it's very encouraging. And women are falling behind too. And you look at the stats. Unfortunately, men are doing a lot better in returning to God, returning to traditional values than women are. But it does show that there's about a 2 to 3 year, pause between the men and the women. So the men are, ascending and becoming better and getting closer to God, going back to church, embracing traditional values, being more masculine. And the women will start over time, start creeping towards those numbers, especially as you see those men start to enter the dating market, things like that. They get married. You're going to start to see a value adjustment. And then, of course, people tend to, of course, put their values into their children. And I think the compounding effect of this, all that to say, is going to be very positive for us. The boomers were
Yes.
a very godless generation. Not to razz on the boomers, but it's true. Very trusting of the institutions, very trusting of, big tech, big science, big academia, the media. They were very trusting of all of that, and did not really hold to any sort of true religion, generally speaking, statistically speaking. And it's like, yeah, they went to church, but when you actually test a lot of them on, what do you actually believe? How does that intersect with your politics? It's really abysmal. So I'm very encouraged to see this return, this resurrection of young men in this country, and hopefully they will do what Charlie Kirk said and get married and have children, and we'll be able to kind of repopulate the country with some heritage American Christian patriots.
Yes, because that's really what we need. Is we need to get back to our roots. We need to get back to our values. We need to get back to our Constitution. And there is a growing movement for that. Man, I wish I had thought about this beforehand. I did see a chart yesterday that illustrated just how far American women have moved to the left over the last 30 years and some of these just insane ideas that they've embraced. And that American men have not moved nearly as far, that the gap between them politically has widened so much over the last 30 years. But the good news was it was starting to taper off. It was starting to go this way. Because at the end of the day, a lot of these women, even these leftist blue-haired moonbats, at the end of the day, you can't beat biology, and they will eventually capitulate. Not the worst of the worst, but they will eventually embrace more traditional values. They can't find some cucked retard to just go along and embrace modern feminism and yes, queen them all the way to the altar. And luckily, more men are standing up to it, which is cutting their options. And then once they're worried about becoming, women that reek of cat piss with barren wombs, once that finally crosses the line, they some of them will change, but it's going to be too late. I mean, I'm really scared with what's going to happen 30, 40 years from now when all these leftards start demanding we take care of them and their cats, and we have a Medicaid for all program to cover them and their 19 felines, and take care of their every need, because God knows it's coming, especially when a lot of these loser leftist women finally realize they missed out, that they are going to die alone, and they need Big Daddy government to take care of them. And they're going to be a big enough voting bloc that they'll actually have some political power. So we need to put a stop to that now before that's even we've got to start getting ahead of the leftists and preventing them from getting what they want. Andrew, any words of wisdom you want to leave the audience with? Sorry, we went a little over.
That's all right. Well, 12 hours ago, Elon Musk posted that high wage mandated. Well, let me pull up the tweet because I got it saved here. I want to get it right. I don't want to butcher it, but I also don't want to be the guy that says, "Let me pull this up," and there's 10 to 15 seconds of painful silence.
Yeah, it happens. It's okay.
Here, I'm really close to it. I'm switching accounts here on X. I just thought this was so significant because this is really what we're heading towards as a country. So Elon Musk posted 12 hours ago, universal high income via checks issued by the federal government is the best way to deal with unemployment caused by AI. AI robotics will produce goods and services far in excess of the increase in the money supply, so there will not be inflation. 33.5 million views. This is the future we're heading towards that fits in line with what you're saying. There will be people who are not going to be able to afford to live. They're not going to be able to, they don't have a work ethic. They don't want to do anything. They've got, underwater basket weaving degree from Harvard. They can't get a job. They're, up to their eyeballs in debt, all these different issues. And something like this, a universal high income via checks issued by the federal government because of AI, that is going to be what happens next. And all you have to do is imagine a system where you have, central bank digital currency and biodigital securities, and, the federal government's giving you your high income check universally through that system on a blockchain ledger. You can sort of see the digital gulag they're building for us, where you're not going to work. You're going to be staying in your house with your VR headset, like very dystopian, right? But this is what we're heading towards.
Yeah.
And we got to get past this. We got to move away from it. It's make America states again. It's reclaiming sovereignty. It's nullifying, saying no to big tech and over AI usage. And that's the path forward. And if we don't do it, we're going to be in big trouble.
You're exactly right. And, something I haven't really got into this on air yet, but it's something I'd like to do an upcoming episode on is exactly that, is this trap. And I think that's going to be the key issue in the 2028 election, because we are going to start seeing, right now, AI has done a lot of harm to people in programming, a lot of tech workers, people like that, call centers. It hasn't really started stripping jobs in bulk from other industries. Yes, some fast food places, as they're embracing, giant iPads and Flippy, the hamburger flipping robot. We're seeing a little bit there. Factories replacing useless workers that they were having to replace over and over again with cheap robotics, can move parts and things like that. That we've seen little bits of it. But I think in another year or two, that's when we're going to start really seeing it spin up and massive job losses from the proliferation of AI into new industries, and it pushed by the federal government too. And that may be the issue Democrats embrace to take down J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio or whoever the heir apparent is to MAGA. They get... Because, I mean, how do you argue with Santa Claus? Freebies for everyone.
Right. That's exactly
so.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, I want to thank you again for joining me today here. To our audience, thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe. Help us to grow so we can bring more people the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear. I'll be back on Monday.